Hi there, and welcome to episode 49 of the ADHD Adults podcast and to ADHD Awareness Month. It says week in the script. Fucking hell. Well, we fucked that one up right from the start, haven't we? Anyway, I'm James Brown, the man with the Technicolor hair, and as usual, I'm joined by someone who I was recently told looked just like Eric Idle, only obviously without the talent, sense of humour, etc. Dr. Alex Connor. Alex, hi.
Don't grumble, give a whistle, and things will always turn out for the best.
I've got to be honest, I didn't foresee that happening. I should have realised that was going to happen, and I didn't. That's my bad. Apologies, listeners. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you. Excited. ADHD Awareness Month, James, month.
Not week.
We planned quite a lot, didn't we, for ADHD Awareness Month, and then thing happened.
The thing.
Yeah, it didn't. Not as much as we wanted. The podcast does not stop growing. I really love our ADHD community. They're just unfailingly positive. And we've had one of them sent us a letter.
Jesus. Brilliant.
It's from a Robert from Kidderminster. It says, How come you had that paramedic on for the parenting podcast, but you didn't ask him to fix whatever is clearly wrong with James? Good question, Robert. I don't know.
It's a brilliant question.
I've been sent a real letter. Can I read it out?
Nope.
It says it's anonymous because I haven't asked because I forgot. Hiya, gents. It's from Australia here.
Oh, jeez. No, stop. Can I just remind you, our second biggest listenership is Australia, and I don't want to lose them, Alex. So please don't.
I also don't want to go to prison for racial insensitivity, so I'm stopping that. My journey is 2 years of suspicion that I have ADHD, which culminated in finding out my oldest brother had just been diagnosed a month ago. Happens a lot. That was the push I needed to get diagnosed. Same for my second oldest brother. And also when I found your podcast, it has actually helped me more than therapists I've tried and has helped me reflect and improve. You fuckers are awesome. That would be brilliant in an Australian accent I can't do. And I got quite sad the other day when I ran out of podcasts, then happy when a new one uploaded. Please don't stop making the podcasts. I lose a reason to wear my impulsively bought Samsung Buds 2 Pro when I'm not listening. Thanks. Really like that. It made us laugh.
I mean, a lot. That's amazing. It's amazing. I've got to say, you must have had some shit therapists, though, if our podcast is better than them.
God, yeah, that is an indictment on the profession. James, can I read something else out? It's not a letter, but it's a review. I think a Spotify podcast review we got. It said, review, a home for deviants. This car crash of a podcast should be avoided at all costs. The attempted humour is atrocious. The hosts present themselves as the opposite of subject matter experts, and the production quality is on the floor. In short, if, like me, you suspect you have ADHD, you'll feel right at home. 5 stars. We loved it.
Fucking brilliant, that is.
It was brilliant. We thank you so much, Joe. I haven't asked permission. I'm saying this commonly. And finally, internationally, it's gone up again. 127 countries. The new one we think might be possibly Venezuela.
We think. The new one you've made up is Venezuela. You're not going to do a. I don't know. Are you going to do an international hello?
I am. Yeah. We're grateful to all the listeners. So this week we'd like to say a big. Well, hola. I suppose the problem is Spain's a really popular language. Hola to Venezuelan listeners. I'm clearly not somebody for whom first or even second language is Spanish, but hola. I know you're from Utah. Do you not think there's an element of hola or something in there? Anyway, usual pathetic standard there also. Everybody, as usual, this market knockoff Tommy Hilfiger jeans of a podcast is a tragedy in 3 parts. We choose a theme. Last week, we had our special with the amazing Dawn and Laura from ADHD as Females to talk about how you can share your experience of ADHD, whether it's a podcast, a blog, or talking in the mirror. This week, we're talking about something which affects almost all of us, and that is the way in which society
just isn't set up for us, and how we face different forms of ableism day in and day out. The 3 parts, as usual, include evidence-based psychoeducation about ableism and ADHD, delivered pathetically by Alex the Psychoeducation Monkey.
Hello.
Our personal reflections on the subject, and then the 3rd and final bit will be spunk trumpeting on how to deal with the issue. Before I carry on, I just want to point out for anybody that isn't watching on YouTube, I've got a brilliant drawing in my background, which Chloe, one of our listeners, sent in. And the picture of Alex's balloon head saying "we've got a letter" is absolutely amazing. So thank you so much for that, Chloe.
Thanks, Chloe. But why have I got no hair on my head? I know it's receding a bit, but that is really hot. And James has got double hair. I think this preferential treatment for. I think
this is very it's a realistic depiction of us. Anyway, Alex, have you got out, or are you just going to waffle on?
Both, James. Thank you. Unsurprisingly, our society is built around the values of the neurotypical people. No individual is neurotypical, but cisgendered, straight, white men with little room for diversity. That's our society. People like you, James, frankly. So progress in other areas like sexual orientation, race, gender identity, as is happening, but obviously not enough. But even with that progress, what little there is in mind, there has been almost nothing in terms of progress for neurodivergence, especially in adults. Collectively, neurodivergent conditions, autism, spectrum disorder, if you prefer, ADHD, Tourette's syndrome, dyslexia, dyspraxia, they've kind of been left behind. So what? Who gives a shit? Why is it a problem? Just with ADHD, adults with ADHD often have to put in massive amounts of effort in an attempt to fit in. And I'm sure that's true for all neurodivergent conditions, to fit into the rules, to fit into the processes of our society. This is masking. We're going to do an episode very soon on exactly that. Even when ADHD adults can mask, the processes side of society can be an absolute shit show.
A little bit like this podcast, maybe.
A shit show, yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
So think of the core and associated symptoms of ADHD: attention, impulsivity, impulsiveness. I don't know which the word is. Time blindness, poor working memory. I could go on and on.
Don't.
I'm going to. We have a society that doesn't work well for these individuals. We're focusing on society, whatever that means, although even people themselves with ADHD often have internal ableism. I know I do. That's the kind of thing we've talked about in the previous episode number something or other, about internalized stigma. We have no idea. Ableism has been defined as a set of psychological or social, economic, cultural, imaginary, technological conditions that privilege the normative way of living and thinking. They promote an ideal that is able-bodied. They cherish particular forms of personhood, as they call it, and of psychological health. It's spatially organized environments around just normative people, and it creates an institutional bias towards autonomous, independent bodies. And this feeds into the form of product. The neoliberal. It's getting political. I'm absolutely aware, but this is what happens. It feeds into that exact thing of product. You buy this thing exactly the same for everyone, and it has to be healthy and normal, for whatever that means. Starting with a real example of access to care for ADHD adults. If you've ever tried to get any care for your ADHD, almost every step of the process is ableist. To the point that a paper last year reported systematic barriers. I'm now doing your rabbit ears, James. Systematic barriers to ADHD diagnosis and treatment in the NHS.
Right.
What can these issues look like? Overcoming rejection sensitivity, anxiety, just to book an appointment.
Yeah.
Being given conflicting opposite information from multiple sources. Endless forms. Being on a waiting list if you're lucky enough to get on the bloody thing. There's a lot of relating going on for me, James, but not knowing the waiting list is one thing. Not knowing when you'll be seen, having to remember when and where. Where do you need to be? Where am I supposed to go to speak to a healthcare professional? And don't forget your medication. Remember to order it in an email. And don't forget to get your blood pressure checked every 3 months if you're on stimulant medication. The list goes on. These are things we do not do well. And healthcare professionals either know this or they should. The good ones know it. And yet here we are. Even research into ADHD is generally done by people who do not have ADHD.
It's so true. Normally I would have interjected and insulted you and talked about your balloon face, etc. But actually,
balloon head.
Yeah. So much of that, for once, Alex, was absolutely bang on. I want to give an example of this, which comes from, I'm not going to name the individual, but it's an individual I know, and it's my area actually, and that's Sandwell, and that is that Mrs. ADHD, as many of you know, recently got a diagnosis after eventually getting a GP to agree to refer her via right to choose, after originally they referred her to the local service. And she went through this whole process of 18 months of, you've got an appointment, but we're not going to tell you who it's with. And you get asked a load of questions, but is that an assessment or not? And then a follow-up letter 3 months later saying, fill in these forms, and if you don't hand them back in 2 weeks, you're off the list. And you do that, and then you're told the next thing is going to be a video conference with your husband, but we're not telling you when. And then a few months later, another letter saying, got no idea when your appointment's going to be. It could be 1 to 2 years' time, but you'll have 2 weeks' notice. And if you can't make that appointment, you're off the list. All of that is against the very core of what ADHD is. And I recently heard actually in the area there isn't even a psychiatrist at the minute to do those assessments. So people in that area, are waiting on a list with no solution. Equally, a lot of the private clinics out there that do not tell you that if they just give you a diagnosis, you might not get a shared care agreement signed, that the NHS might not take over your care because they're just selling a diagnosis. There's so much about this which is ableist. It's ridiculous.
Isn't it? There's nothing you can do about it except vote.
Exactly.
And that's just healthcare, James. Outside of healthcare, bigger problem. There is an expectation everywhere in our society to be early, to be on time, to meet deadlines, to remember simple things, or to read long documents and small print, to fill in forms with sufficient detail, to sit still and pay attention. Oh, my whole life, during meetings and school, loads of others. Adults with ADHD struggle in our current society due to systemic embedded ableism found in the culture, found in communication, all of our processes. James wrote that bit, and I realised he likes Oxford commas. I didn't realise how much I have to hate him.
I'm not 100% sure what an Oxford comma is, to be honest.
It's a kind of shoe. A lot of these processes contribute to the ADHD tax we've talked about before. Booking flights on the wrong day, James. Not realising you've already booked a hotel, James. Missing appointments. There are barriers littered throughout society which compound how difficult it is for us to get through life, or get through it without shame and expense. And again, you're listening right now to 2 cisgendered, white, middle-class, middle-aged men. We've got all the privilege. If you're not in that demographic, it's even more difficult. And I promise you, it is difficult for us. But we see you, and we know we do know.
It's so true, and that's why I'm really kind of happy we're talking about this during ADHD Awareness Month, because actually, like you say, it's hard enough to navigate the healthcare system and get a diagnosis and move on with your life. But that doesn't change the fact that society is still going to ask you to do stuff you can't do or you struggle to do in almost every domain of your life. Bit uncomfortable. There's nothing I can really criticize there. You delivered it relatively
not quite positive,
well.
Was it? Relatively.
Well, yeah, but that's fine. In my case, if it's not positive, I'm a grumpy bastard. But on that note of being a grumpy bastard, we'll take a break and we'll come back in part 2 for some personal reflections on Alex being a twat. I had to put something negative in, mate. I had to.
That was ableist. Welcome back to episode 49.
What was the pause for? What was the pause for? You count down. You get to 1, and then you leave 5 seconds after 1, where I'm sat here thinking he's going to start soon. He's going to start soon. For fuck's sake!
I just think there's a delay. Welcome back to episode 49 of the ADHD Adults Podcast in the 2022 October ADHD Awareness Month. We're talking about ableism, this square pegs in round holes things of being an adult with ADHD in our normative society. This is part 2 where we always bang on about personal reflections. James, because you're the most affected, I'm going to ask what are your perspectives and personal reflections on being a square peg in a very round hole.
The most affected, you wank.
I don't know what I mean.
I mean, there's obviously just so much. We've all got a lifetime of personal reflections, but I've got so much of relatively recent, which I think are important to me personally and emotionally, and that's why I'm going to talk about them. So, as you are aware, technically we're a charity, and we have been a charity since January the 4th, and we still don't.
We're literally.
Well, no, I know, but what I'm saying is we're not fucking spending money on stuff, and there's a reason for that. And if you let me finish, you gigantic bell end, I'll explain why I use that term. We were incorporated as a charity on January the 4th, and we still don't have a charity bank account. So I don't want to do the maths on that, but that's 3 years roughly, isn't it, Al? Something like that.
Yeah, give or take.
Yeah, give or take. And the processes we've been through have just been massively ableist. So we did a search, first of all, what's the best charity bank account? And all the websites say Metro Bank. Calling them out, don't give a fuck. So looked online, looked at all the forms that I needed to take to a branch to get a bank account. Filled in all the forms, even got you to sign something, which is fucking impossible.
Really hard, yeah.
Took the forms with me, with Mrs. ADHD, to the local branch of Metro Bank. They sat us down, took us over to the counter, and a guy went, "Oh yeah, no, you need this form." And obviously I went fucking mental, lost my shit in a massive emotional dysregulation, which is I think what we're going to cover in an upcoming episode of the podcast, and stormed out, leaving Mrs. ADHD stood embarrassedly at the counter. And obviously then, Alex, I could never go back to Metro Bank because the RSD and the emotional dysregulation. But they'd told us what forms to bring. And I brought those forms. And they went, no, you need these forms. So I thought, okay, fair enough. That's just a month wasted. Realised that it would be easier to do an online application for a charity bank account. And you look, and the one that gets recommended is HSBC. Again, happy to call them out. So did the online application, which in itself is quite complicated because I've got to herd the sheep that are the trustees of the charity to sign documents and to fill in forms and to give me details. And after about a month, I got to speak to somebody at HSBC, and it was a lovely chat, actually. And they asked us about how much money do you think you're going to raise and blah, 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 blah. And said, right, you've just got a few more forms to fill in, filled those forms in, and then waited and waited and waited a bit longer. And after 3 months, when I remembered we'd applied for a bank account, I thought, I better chase this up. So he emailed them, didn't get a reply. Waited about another month, emailed them again, didn't get a reply, kept forgetting, obviously. Eventually got a reply saying, "I'm so sorry, the person that was handling your applications left and they deleted your application. So you've got to go back to the start." So we'd wasted months by this point. So I thought, okay, fair enough. Try and stay calm because we're halfway through this process. I don't want to start again. Then had to make
through the story.
Fuck off. Then had to make another appointment, which was with the lovely Georgiana, who was really helpful and really kind, and said, "I will make sure that we sort this out." And again, within a month, some more forms came through. Filled those forms in, and the email we got said, "Email them back to us." So I emailed them back to them, and then a month later got an email saying, "Oh, we need wet ink signatures. Can you post them?" And it didn't say that. So it's all these delays are because of little details which it's hard to spot, or because of poor communication. And it's hard enough if you're not got ADHD, but this process, which still hasn't finished, we're still waiting to hear. It's now been, give or take 3 years, a ridiculous amount of time to set up a bank account. And it's all about the institutions that we work around just not taking into consideration neurodivergence. If you think about
it at all,
no, not at all. It's not a thing to them. Why would they think that somebody might struggle filling out 4 forms, which collectively are 36 pages long, and where one of the forms, when you're filling it in for a charity, just says name? And name of charity, name of me. I don't fucking know. Which is it? So I sent both in because
Just
I didn't
yes.
because I didn't fucking know. Getting back to the NHS side of things, I've said this before. My ADHD self-report when I got diagnosed, it was so long, I didn't fill in 2 boxes because I just couldn't be asked. So my diagnosis, although it's valid, I was positive for 14, not 16 domains. The amount of free trials I have signed up for software and other services, thinking, right, well, I've got 7 days of that, and then obviously forgotten that I'm now paying £39 a month for something I'm not using, and 6 months later realize it almost feels like that's designed for us, Al, because they know we're going to forget.
Half of my Kindle Unlimited subscription paid for Jeff Bezos to go into space with Captain Kirk.
Well, the book's largely about kind of the royal lineage in around the 17th century.
Oh, you're talking Shard Lake series of medieval crime fiction.
Amazing.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Relatedly, I paid for a SIM card for 12 months, which had already been. Just renewed the contract, couldn't use it. I've missed payments all the time. I changed my direct debit, but didn't read the small print about when the direct debit for my credit card would change. So I missed a payment that affected my credit rating, put in a complaint saying I've got ADHD, and 6 months later they said, yeah, we did nothing wrong, sorry. And obviously my credit rating was fucked anyway, but it made it a bit worse. But, and this is the only positive side of this, is the first time that I disclosed my ADHD in an environment which wasn't particularly ADHD friendly and said, I've got ADHD, I can't do that, was a fucking revelation. Now, it was responded to positively, and it won't be for everybody, but actually the people that I was in a meeting with immediately said, oh, okay, well, we'll do things differently then. So that, just to kind of end it on a slightly positive personal reflection, that I'm lucky enough that I don't give a fuck what anyone thinks about me, and therefore I was happy to say I can't do that thing. I've got ADHD. It is, yeah, because can you imagine otherwise? But the power in that for me was huge. For me personally, it's not going to be the same for everybody, but actually not changing the world, but changing the people around me by saying, I can't do that thing. You've got to do something different. And luckily the people accepted it. What about you bellend?
Well, I mean, firstly, we should change the podcast to Burning Bridges with Banks. and secondly, we're really grateful to our fantastic and talented volunteer trustees who are not sheep. Guys, we love you. That's amazing. It's like herding sheep. It's all you meant.
No, it's literally herding sheep.
It is
literally herding sheep.
It is. I mean, 3 of them are actual sheep, so that's fair.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to write for this because it feels like asking fish, have you experienced water? Asking me if I've experienced ableism. I don't know where to start. Everything, all the time. I honestly don't use the word ableism very much, really, because I feel that ADHD people have been sort of conditioned to feel like fraudsters for saying that you're differently abled. And I don't want to be accused of moaning, but it's rampant. This week, I had an MRI, and they told me almost disdainfully, can you keep your leg completely still for 20 minutes? Stare at the ceiling. I have a neurological hyperkinetic disorder. Not really. And it was, quite grumpy about it. And they even gave me an appointment on a little card with nothing else, and then didn't tell me where to go or what to do afterwards with it. And, that's just one thing. It happens to me all the time in every circumstance. I had a German test, which the test is to see if you can understand German, right? So they read out a list of German things, like this is a conversation. You haven't got a pen and paper, and then they ask you a series of questions about it. That's attested by working memory. So I couldn't do it. And so my wife, who is German, said, well, translate it for me as they're going along. And so I just told her what they were saying perfectly. And yet the question was Simona in the school or Johannes? I don't know who those people are. I don't remember either of the names. And I didn't know what. This is why I wasn't very good at languages at school. It wasn't because I couldn't do it. I didn't remember the fucking question. awful. It happens all the time, and I think the shame of all the mistakes means that you just and the self internalized ableism. I just sort of sigh and raise my eyes, and a tiny little bit of my cold, dark soul dies every time, and I have a drink. I just drink.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad you do in a way. You're much more palatable when you're drunk. I listen again. You're right. The fish water analogy, horrifyingly, is very accurate. Just to add to your MRI thing, I went to an eye test recently. Anyone that's had an eye test and been asked to do the Fields test, which is where you have to stare at a dot.
I got bored.
Yeah, and say when you see things on your periphery. I actually think that would be a really good test for identifying people with ADHD, and I refused to do it. So I'm sorry, I can't. And they went, "Oh, come back on another day," and I just ignored the email. I cannot physically sit there staring at one bit for like fucking 10 minutes, waiting for little dots on the periphery. It's ridiculous. So I totally get that. Do you want to play a game, Alex?
Oh yeah, what kind of game?
It's a game where you get to get, oh, I fucking fell for that, motherfucker. As usual, you've got a choice, Alex, and it's spectacles or laptops. I'm guessing which one you're going to pick.
Probably. I've just got a new computer, so spectacles, please.
Good one. Okay, so I mentioned that I had an eye test, and I'm at the age now, Alex, in my 20s, where I need varifocals, because I can't basically see anything. And I impulsively bought the most expensive ones because they said, "Oh, we do, these lenses have a wider field of view and it's easier to see things, and they've got a special coating and their designer." So I spent 400 quid on 2 pairs of varifocal glasses. And this is a question related to those things.
Does it make you feel sick? Like seasick?
I may get to that actually.
Oh, okay.
If so, what you may notice now, you can't tell if you're watching, but I'm not wearing them. I'm just wearing my close-up glasses. What's the fucking phrase? Reading glasses.
Geek glasses.
Fuck off. Right. So why is it I'm not wearing my varifocals, Al? Is it one that I've lost both pairs, and this is 2 weeks after getting them? Is it 2 that they don't work, but I can't go back and kind of ask for them to be changed because of kind of a mixture of RSD and emotional fear? Or is it 3 that I've broken both pairs already?
Ooh. I'm going to answer this with one, using my winning formula of logic. It isn't 1 or 3 because you've said both pairs in both, and we all know you can't count up to 2. So I think they don't work and you can't go back.
Fucker. That's the first one you've won in, I can't even, like 10 episodes possibly. Yeah, I can't see 20. Anything. I can't see anything either close up or far away in them. They are literally
upside down.
No, they're literally useless. Everything. I have to kind of trying to adjust my head and try and find a sweet spot, and there fucking isn't one. So I'm 400 quid spunked up the wall. Fuck it. Oh, I'm distraught that you've won a game, Alex, and I need time to reflect on that. So we'll take a break and we will be back. Look at the smile on his face, for fuck's sake. We'll be back in part 3.
You with varifocals losing a game that you like and I hate. I couldn't be happy.
We'll be back in part 3 for Spunk Trumpeting with Gabby Logan. See you in a bit.
Easy for you to say.
Welcome back to episode... What?
B.
What?
I said B.
It's hard enough with ADHD, preparing for a podcast, recording a podcast, editing a podcast, which does happen, Alex, without having to put up with you. Let's just leave that there. Welcome back to episode 49 of the ADHD Adult Square Pegs in Round Holes, where we're talking about the societal and internal ableism that we all face every day in all of our lives. This is the final part of the podcast, where we provide some top tips, also known as spunk trumpeting. And I'm going to let Captain Balloonhead go first because I don't think he's sold on any of my ideas. So fire away, Alex.
It's a tricky one, this. I think what I would say is that my top tip for dealing with ableism, to experiencing ableism, is it's a nuanced form of emotional acceptance, blah, blah, blah. And it is emotional acceptance that, in fact, this is real, that adult ADHD is a disability and society doesn't really support it. I should say, I think that it's also worth accepting that ableism isn't a campaign, apart from our government. It's not. No one plans to be ableist. No one plans to do these systemic normative things. It's a problem of convenience. I was reflecting on my own ableism, and James, I just didn't put subtitles on a video because I couldn't be bothered. I didn't know how to do it. It's too hard. But imagine being hearing impaired, how it must feel that someone didn't do that. Oh, I couldn't be bothered with him. Couldn't be bothered with me. And we've learned how to do it now. But the key is to accept that it's real and call it out if you have the social capital to do it, spot it and accept it. But I think the emotional acceptance that it's always going to be there, and we have to try and advocate for adult ADHD and the real adult ADHD as well in society to make change as much as we can if you have that power. That's my top tip.
I'm glad you said that. No, I'm glad you said that's my top tip because it was, I wasn't listening obviously to any of that, but it gave me an indication that this is my cue for me to do my bit. So if you could do that in the future, actually just loudly say, those were my top tips, James, then I'll know that I have to kind of re-engage. But what I'll say is that if you are in a position to disclose your ADHD and to kind of be open about it, then consider doing so, because it's only through people and organizations and institutions learning that their processes are possibly accidentally ableist or certainly not neurodivergent friendly that change is going to happen. They ain't going to change themselves, and unless they've got people who are neurodivergent within their organization fighting for that change. It doesn't always work when you do this, but some organizations do actually have some policies in place. I mentioned my credit card earlier and how I changed my direct debit, but obviously didn't read the small print. When I told them I had ADHD, they immediately said, oh, well, do you need help with that? Because we've got support in place for people that impulse spend. And I thought, that's interesting that they don't kind of talk about it, but if you phone up and you're in trouble, they seem to have a base level understanding that they can help you. But it needed me to disclose that. If I was just impulse spending and I didn't tell them, they'd just say, your credit's fucked, we're going to take your card off you. Equally, there are things you can do with disclosing that can chop away at things like the ADHD tax. Somebody got in touch recently to say that they had taken our advice because they had a parking fine which they had paid late, and obviously the fine increased, and they wrote to them saying, I'm sorry, I've got ADHD, and I forgot to pay the fine. I'm happy to pay the original price, and they were allowed to do that. So sometimes if you are in a powerful enough position, and if you have a diagnosis, and if you're willing to, then disclosing and talking about your ADHD can help in little ways. And the more of us that do that, the more people will be aware of what ADHD is, and that maybe some of their processes or rules, etc., don't really fit us. The other thing is obviously is to speak up more generally. We need voices to make change. This month, ADHD Awareness Month, is literally, Alex, about raising awareness of what ADHD is, so that people who don't know about it, people who don't believe it's real, people who don't have it but maybe want to learn about it can. So we need voices to make change at every level. You're right in terms of vote and government, but also locally. I can see your hands up, Alex, so fire away.
I just wanted to add that we have to do that across all industries. We have to speak if we can from all industries, all levels, from the very top all the way down to pretend professors, James.
All the way down to pretend professors, Alex.
Yeah, all levels.
Professorial fellows as well, I imagine, would fit into that category, wouldn't they? Al, would they? Do you think professorial fellow, would that be a pretend professor? Do you think
it's too premature to announce? Don't.
I haven't announced anything. I'm talking about theoretical positions here, Alex.
Have we got a product, James?
Well, yeah, we've kind of got to. So we were going to talk. So I want to say this because Scott sent it in. That if you use an Android phone, there's an app called O Launcher, which clears up your homepage, and that's great. But as a product, because it ties in with a change that we've made, we've been talking about having a community for people for ages, and we finally, after so many people said, "Have you tried Discord?" And because I couldn't set it up on my phone, I went, "It doesn't work." Set it up on my Mac, and now it works. So we now have, or we use, Discord as a community forum. There's lots of different sub forums on there for local areas. You can speak to people in your area that have ADHD, organize meetups if you want. I'm sure I'll set up a group on insults for Alex, for example, if you want to give me some fuel for what to say to him. But download Discord on your smartphone or use it on your website and just engage with people in our community, because it can help you feel less isolated. Right then. That was episode 49 of the ADHD Adults podcast, where we talked about being square pegs in round holes, the broad subject of ADHD and ableism. In the massively unlikely event that you enjoyed the podcast, you can always support the show on the link provided, as otherwise Alex is going to have to start painting again, and Home Bargains have recently run out of crayons. So on that note, you can get in touch with us as usual on the socials at ADHD Adult UK, and we will see you next time. Take care.
We should have called it square pegging. Bye all.
Trigger warning, klaxon, 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 klaxon.